May this be for God's greater honor and glory. Amen. Please be seated. It was in January of 1983, I had the chance to go on a month-long study tour of Jordan, Israel, and Egypt in January. So it was very cold, wintertime. We landed in Amman, Jordan, and we spent a week there. And then we took a bus from Amman, Jordan, down to the southern entryway into Israel, which is called the Allenby Bridge. It crosses the Jordan River, which is really just a little stream at that point. And as we did, we got into Israel in Jericho, which is where the Allenby Bridge is, and we took a tour bus up to Jerusalem. So I was on the road that is mentioned in today's gospel according to Luke. It's a one nasty ride on that bus. It was very narrow, very hilly, lots of rocks all around, and rock outcrops where it was easy to walk by, and you're surrounded on either side by these huge boulders, and there could be any number of people hiding behind those boulders, ready to pounce on you as you went by. And it was known that this was a very dangerous route, even in Jesus' day. It was pretty difficult even back in 1983. We went through this portion of the road, and there were big boulders on either side. Couldn't see much. Actually, it even blotted out the sun. And as we went past these boulders, the tour guide said, "Okay, now look back." And so we all looked back, and there were sheep that they were tending on the other side of the boulders. Couldn't see them. So it was possible to hide a great deal of people, many people, ready to pounce on unsuspecting and unwary travelers and to kill them and take their money, which is exactly the story that Jesus relates in the gospel. That road has been known throughout history as a very dangerous route to take. By the 5th century, St. Jerome, who's the patron of Bible scholars, nicknamed it Via Ruber, Red Road. Red because of all the blood that was spilled on that road. Roman soldiers, as fearsome as they were forbidden to travel even in groups of 2s and 3s on that road. They had to be armed, and there had to be at least a dozen of them going from Jericho to Jerusalem, so that if anything happened to them, they would have a fighting chance of escaping without being harmed. So it's in that context that Jesus is talking about this fellow who you could be forgiven for thinking was a real fool for traveling down that road by himself. There's no indication that he was with anybody else. He was just there on his own, and he fell in with robbers who practically killed him. Every good deed has an immediate effect and then a long-term effect. Now, the immediate effect in the case of this man was that he was saved by this fellow, and he was bandaged and taken to an inn, and the fellow took care of him and then repaid the innkeeper whatever he owed on his way back. That was the immediate effect. The fellow was taken care of. The long-term effect of that good deed lasts for a lifetime. Now, just suppose for a minute that the fellow who was beaten wakes up the next morning, sore from head to foot, you can be sure, and the innkeeper comes in and looks at him, and the guy says, "Well, what happened?" And the innkeeper said, "Well, you were mugged and you were practically killed." "Well, how did I get here?" "Well, somebody came along and bandaged you up and put you on his donkey and brought you here." And the fellow said, "Well, I was lying on the road bleeding, and I remember I saw 2 people go by, but they didn't stop. They saw me, but they didn't stop." And then I passed out. And he said, so who took care of me? And the answer came back, a Samaritan. Now, just suppose for a minute that this fellow who was mugged hated Samaritans, hated them, and with good reason. The Jews in the southern part of Judea and the Samaritans, who are in the middle, had a long-standing grudge against one another. And so they kind of made it an afternoon sport to see who could hate the other one more. So when the answer came back, well, a Samaritan helped you, it changed that fellow's worldview completely. It turned him around so much that he was able to understand that kindness can exist even among people whom we hate. That there is a long-standing, enduring result of a good deed shown to one another. Now, the fellow who was in the inn recovering from his wounds certainly had a lot to tell his family when he got back home. But what really is important in this story is not so much that he took the time to take care of him, although that's very important, but that there was a long-standing effect that came from his good deed. He remembered being saved for the rest of his life. He never forgot it for a minute. How could he? Why should he forget it? His life was saved by somebody that he used to hate. And now all of a sudden, his whole worldview is turned upside down. That's the power of a good deed. A good deed is not only something that's immediate, that happens right now, but a good deed is something that can last for a long, long time. It can come from the most unexpected places. It can come from people whom we least regard as being worthy of our attention, and yet they're willing to show us kindness. So as we reflect on this gospel, and we've heard it 100 times, there's not a whole lot that a preacher can say about this because we all know it and we can recite it by heart. But the long-standing effect of a good deed is something that we can never take for granted and is something that we can never erase, because people remember kindness. Years later, they remember kindness. It's all the more reason for us as baptized Christians to practice what that Samaritan practiced: compassion, mercy, forgiveness, all of the things that bind us together to make us children of God. Amen. Amen. May God be praised.